Well, welcome and good evening, wonderful dice of all alignments. I am Lunar D8, and this is part 5. Let's read the Chaos Daemons supplemental book for Warhammer 40,000. Today's chapter: Slannesh, the Dark Prince. Slannesh is the Lord of Pleasure, the dark god dedicated to the pursuit of earthly gratification and the overthrow of all decent behavior. He is the god of obsession, the master of excess in all things, from gluttony to lust and megalomania. Wherever mortals are ruled by their own unquenchable desires, the Dark Prince is there in the shadows, whispering, tempting, and feasting on a banquet of souls. Slannesh was given life by the immortality and the hubris of the ancient Eldari civilization. As their empire reached its zenith, their people became lost in their own decadence, where they experienced sensation to a far greater degree than any other species. The capabilities of their highly advanced technologies meant the Eldari did not need to labor or wage war. Instead, they were able to dedicate their lives to whatever idle pursuits took their fancy. Over many generations, indolence came to rule their spirits. In the Immaterium, the reflections of their excesses caused a new chaos power to stir, created by pure indulgence. The first motes of Slannesh began to coalesce. The dormant Slannesh fed upon the unchecked psyche of the Eldari, drawing on their lust and ambition, their artistry and pursuit of excellence. In turn, as Slannesh grew, its nascent dreams trickled into the minds of the Eldari and fueled their desires, pushing them ever onwards towards their doom. Eventually, the Eldari civilization devolved into little more than pleasure cults, dedicated to every act of physical, mental, and spiritual fulfillment. Blood stained the sanctuary of their plazas as crowds of drug-addled maniacs sated their violent desires in the streets. On one particularly depraved night, the debauchery reached a terrible crescendo that tore out the heart of the Eldari Empire and left it ravaged beyond recovery. The fall of the Eldari, signaled by the birth scream of Slannesh, a tsunami of emotion that announced the Prince of Pleasure's arrival in the realm of chaos. The psychic implosion caused by Slannesh's creation swallowed hundreds of worlds of the heart of the Eldari civilization, killing billions of their race in an instant, and devouring a great section of the galaxy in the process. Such was its ferocity that it overwhelmed the barrier between the real and the unreal, forming the massive warp rift known as the Eye of Terror. Rampant and hungry, Slannesh devoured the minds of the Eldari, and across the galaxy the race was almost wiped out. Even their gods were slain. All but 3 of their pantheon devoured. Of their once great empire, only a relative few Eldari survived. Slannesh's birth feast. Most of the survivors became sworn enemies of the Dark Prince, and yet a number of them have formed isolated cabals that still behave as their ancestors did. Perversely following the downward spiral of excess. That is how events are viewed from the chronology of the material universe. In the warp, things are different, for the Immaterium is not bound by linear time, and events do not occur in a strict sequence of cause, then effect. As his rival gods reckon it, Slannesh has always existed, and yet has never existed at all. The Palace of Selanesh. While the other Chaos gods rarely welcome intruders to their lands within the Immaterium, Slannesh loves to tempt visitors to his unnatural domain, and those that dare enter the Lord's pleasure territory risk becoming trapped in its warped delights for eternity. Slannesh realm is divided into 6 domains, arranged in the concentric rings about the Palace of Pleasure. Each of these is a celebration of Slanesh's desires, and while they might be mistaken for paradises, nothing in the land of the Dark Prince is as it seems. An intruder can only reach the Palace of Pleasure, in the very heart of Slanesh's territory, by passing through all 6 of the circles. An act of will beyond most souls, both mortal and demonic. One amongst the mortal visitors to his realm still looms large in the memory of Slannesh, however, a wandering knight of Adeptus Astartes, whose resolve was as strong as silvered adamantium. The first circle the knight pushed through was richly appointed beyond the dreams of kings. Mountains of gold, stacked gold, reached toward the rainbow mosaics of gemstones and the marble bolts high above. Glittering ingots and diamonds beyond count litter the ground. The knight marched past many a starving wretch attempting to count the innumerable gold coins. Their sallow faces twisted with mounting greed until their piles topped it over, and weeping, they had to start over again. At every corner and every crossroad stood gilded statues, some of beautiful Slannesh, and others of daemons and mortals trapped in blissful ecstasy. The trails in the diamond dust underfoot betrayed the fact that the statues were once flesh and blood. The knights had left notions of material wealth long behind, and he strode on without touching a single coin. Crunching his way across a beach of golden teeth, the knight came to shores of a vast lake of dark wine. The lake was dotted with pallid islands, formed from the backs of giants, each linked by crisscrossing bridges. The backward hands of each giant held up a table that groaned under the weight of a lavish feast. There he saw mortal men gorging themselves on the banquet, wide-eyed and desperate in their hunger, as others frantically tried to gulp down the lake itself. The bloated and obese moaned in pain as they crammed ever more food into their wine-stained mouths. The knight pressed on, distaste twisting the features, as he passed the grisly remains of those who had consumed so much that they had physically burst apart. The wanderer made his way through fields of golden light and soft hay, where lissom maidens and beautiful youths frolicked near naked in the hallucinogenic musk of the lithe beast that cavorted with them. The faces and fertile forms of the dancers were impossibly sensual, molded to the perfect desire of the heart. The knight held his breath and closed his eyes, for though mortal pleasures were forbidden to his order, part of him was still a man. The crooning nymphs gathered around the knight, stroking his silvered armor and whispering of the sweet carnal pleasures they would give him. But he yielded not. The severed limbs and heads that lay underfoot spoke of the truth behind the honeyed lies. Eyes shut, he cut down the demonic seductresses around him, one after another, letting revulsion guide his shining blade. After fighting his way through the feminine contours of the foothills ahead, the knight emerged onto a balcony where he was greeted by roars of adulation and approval. An army of space marines, so vast its number was beyond counting, awaited before him an endless plain, listening in fevered anticipation of his commands for conquest. Planetary governors nodded in obsequious anticipation, and the high lords of Terra smiled up at him from the smaller balconies of their own, motioning him to speak. The knight recognized one of the rulers from his own mortal life, and stood before him looking deep into the philosopher king's eyes. Behind the mask of power and self-assurance he saw eternal, nagging paranoia, gnawing suspicion, and hidden doubts that were acid to the soul. The knight shook his head and sadly walked away. Wearied by his ordeals, the wanderer strode on, through a mesmerizing woodland paradise, its maze of pathways thick with flowers and heavy with thorns. The gentle, fragrant breeze whispered to the knight of past glories, reminding him of the executions he had performed in the Emperor's name. Mirrored pools reflected the night as a shining saint, his face serene, but his sword bloodied as he artfully carved apart rank after rank of red-skinned daemons. The warrior turned away, troubled. In the distance he could make out tortured figures staring intently into mirrored pools of their own, each held immobile by their undergrowth as whispering thorns insinuated themselves into their flesh. The wanderer turned his mind to the humility of the cell he once called home. As he did so, the path through the maze writhed and straightened out before him. So the night trudged on. An endless beach stretched away from the night, and heavenly choirs sung soothing lullabies as the perfumed sea lapped at the fortress walls of the mine. The wanderer's bones cried out for rest, even if only for a moment. The warmth of the golden sun above calmed his soul, and the tide began to erode his will. His tired eyes could barely stay open, but his vision was still clear enough to see the horrible truth. The bone-white sand was from the remains of those who had rested here and fallen into a coma of blissful influence. His resolve hardened, and the knight strode on toward the shimmering palace in the distance. It was there, beyond the elegant spires, that the wanderer came before almighty Slannesh, statuesque and divinely glamorous. The deity visited him in the form of a young man, possessed of an androgynous beauty. Clean-limbed and fresh with vigor of youth, the knight unsheathed his rune-etched sword and made to strike him down. To his horror he found that he could not, for the god prince was disarming in his innocence and utterly beguiling in his manner. Even the purest flame can be extinguished by the tide, and in the single moment of doubt the wanderer was lost. He knelt, bowing his head at last, and a single touch of the being's glowing scepter on each shoulder sealed his fate for eternity. The enemy within. Some say that it is impossible for mortals to look upon the divine face without losing their soul, for all those who see it become willing slaves to the will of the Dark Prince, embracing his ways with wild abandon. The mere knowledge of Slanesh's existence can cause a world to topple into corruption and depravity. It is for this reason, and many others, that the protectors of the Imperium seek to keep the knowledge of what lies beyond the veil a secret. Not even the Holy Inquisition know for sure how far Slanesh's influence has already spread throughout their empire. For wherever the lust for power and temporal pleasures exist, the talons of Slannesh will dig deep. Despite their best efforts, it is almost certain that the Imperium is rotten, perhaps even to the core. Just as the Eldari Empire was before it, it is with the fearful and weary eyes of the survivors of the ancient race, who, after long millennia, still have to run and hide from the predations of Slannesh, look upon mankind and wonder, how long will it be before they succumb to a similar fate? The Legions of Excess. Slanesh's legions of excess strike with a sinuous grace, hitting the foe in a whirling blur of lithe and bladed limbs. As they do so, they are at once horrific and alluring, mesmerizing and loathsome. Slanesh's daemon legions vary in composition and purpose, but all desire to spread their lord's corruption. Slannesh uses temptation and the promise of pleasures to seduce mortals and daemons alike, and thus there are many brought into submission by the Dark Prince. These insidious tactics take time, however, and often a less subtle approach is required to fulfill Slanesh's whims, when the souls of mortals need to be more forcefully cut from their bodies, rather than given willingly, or a territory within the Imperium must be fought over. Slannesh calls upon his demonic armies, the Legions of Excess. Although Slanesh's forces cannot match the raw power of Khorne's cohorts, the resiliency of Nurgle's Talibans, or the eldritch might of Tzinitik's hosts. They are possessed of a speed and lethality that is unequaled in the Immaterium and real space both, a god of whims and bizarre fancies. The Dark Prince encourages such personal fulfillment of his generals, the keepers of secrets, the dark heart of a legion of excess. There are also noted instances of legions of excess being led by daemon princes for Slannesh Lans, the greatest of his once mortal champions, perhaps more than of any of his other brothers. While some of the Dark Prince's generals are obsessive in commanding a single type of legion, the majority will change formations as mood or need suits them. Each type of legion of excess varies greatly in composition. And the tactics they employ. The Flayer legions are given over to wanton destruction, and their many daemonettes take great pleasure in the act. The Hunter legions are masters of the quick kill, and are built primarily around fast-moving cavalry and chariots. They are ideal for tracking down specific quarry, for Slannesh always collects his due. The flamboyant Glamatrix legions are the most sorcerous, relying heavily upon psychic powers and mesmerism. The Terror legions are a shock force, specializing in elaborate, gory displays of combat. They are infamous for unleashing a barrage upon the senses that can overwhelm weak-willed enemies. The legions of eternal punishments have no specialty, but rather call upon all the damnations of Slannesh, intermixing facets of magic and temptation alongside with their finely honed battlecraft. Perhaps strangest of all, the legions of excess, however, are the Connaught legions. To them battle is but a dance. Their garish daemons whirl about one another as they slay the foe in bizarrely choreographed maneuvers, while they lack the speed in pursuit of the other types of legions of excess, the elegance and creativity with which each kill is carried out often capture the favor of their divine master in a way that more practically assaults could never hope to emulate. Beneath the keepers of secrets and hierarchy are the heralds of daemon princes that each lead one of the legion's cavalcades. Of these formations there are 6 in total, for that is the number most often associated with Slannesh. The main body of troops in most cavalcades are the lesser daemons, known as daemonettes, the handmaidens of the Lord of Pleasure. The cavalcades of those legions with a predilection for speed or hitting power. Such a hunter or terror legions will often include a large number of seeker cavalry, seeker chariots, and hellflayers in support of a daemonette pack. Any of the legion types can include the beasts known as fiends, but they appear in the greatest numbers in Galactic, the Terror legions, and are infrequent in the Corruption legions. The Slytherin led by the Keeper of Secrets, known as Krut, the Pale Death. The Slytherin Legion is the foremost amongst the Flayer legions that took part in the final assault of the Cadian system. It was one of the 6 legions of excess that made up the decadent horde, a vast army of the Dark Prince led by the exalted great daemon Sidra, the sinuous. Opposite can be seen slithering composition as it entered real space. The Promenade of Pain, led by Slannesh, Herald of Slannesh. Cavalcade composed of 2 daemonette packs, 2 seeker packs, and 2 hellflares. This cavalcade is held in great so, patiently awaiting the right moment to perform their devastating charge. On Machiaria, it was they that broke through the defenses of the governor's stronghold, the Eviscerators, led by Silaza, the Eviscerator, Herald of Selanesh. Cavalcade composed of the 5 daemonette packs and 1 secret pack. In every battle, the Eviscerators attempt to outslay their rivals. The cavalcade led by the Mistress Azalea. Thus far, they have yet managed to dethrone Cruelt's favored sister, but they will halt at nothing to gain the Keeper of Secrets' praise. The Maidens of Torment, led by Mistress Azalea, Herald of Slannesh. Cavalcade composed of 6 demonic packs. When Cruel takes to the battlefield, he is accompanied by the Maidens of Torment. During the invasion of Cadia, they grew bored of slaughtering Imperial defenders and sought out a Taliban, Slogoth, Hawksbelly plague legions. The daemonettes that followed Mistress Azalea took delight in fighting against the minions in Nurgle, adorning themselves with the still warm, trailing guts of the plague bearers, while cavorting across the corrupted and corpse-strewn battleground. The Impalators, led by Drizha Impaler, Herald of Slannesh, cavalcade composed of 3 daemonette packs, 2 feed packs, and the exalted seeker chariot. They never stop slicing, even after their playthings die. Dreadspeed, led by Lushrex Lashtung, Daemon Prince. Cavalcade composed of 3 daemonette packs, 2 seeker packs, and a seeker chariot. It was the Dreadspeed Cavalcade that carved a path of red ruin through the largest population center of the Hive, Nufenia upon Machiar. Nothing that moves or breathes is spread in their merciless reaping. Hell's Shriekers, led by Siskashkashkash as the glistening claw, Herald of Slannesh. Cavalcade composed of 3 daemonette packs, a seeker pack, and a fiend pack, and a hell flare. Before beginning their orgy of violence, the Hellish Shriekers emit such banshee-like shrieks of exultation that only the bravest foes dare stand their ground against them. Such courage offers little protection in the slaughter to come. Well, that's it for this reading of it. For the next page is a map of the galaxy. It's called Galactic Corruption. There's no way I can read this in any discernible way for you guys to understand a fucking thing. Because it's literally a map just completely covered with like several hundred labels. It'd be one thing if I could show you the picture, but I don't know how to fucking work any of that kind of shit. So I don't know how to show you anything. All I can say is if you want to see this picture, which is page... Are none of these pages numbered? I think it would have... Nope, I don't think a single page is numbered. Nope. Some of them are. Why are like only 1/10 of the pages numbered? Okay, let me do math. Page 26 and page 27. Hey, I can't. But it's a giant galactic map showing chaos, strongholds, or demon worlds, demonic incursions, warp storms, or planets. It's really cool. there's no way I can explain this in any way. Anyway, I think the next chapter will be like me going through the timeline of all the shit. But I don't know when I'll ever do that. So hope everyone had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.